like as we were getting started. You're doing it again. Are you doing it on purpose? That was good. That was impressive. I was like, oh man, is it frozen? Yeah.
Well, now I can't do it. I'm too giggly.
Yeah.
That's too much fun to mess with you.
Yeah. It's pretty easy. All right, let's kick it off. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Function Call. I got my man Grant Glidewell on the show today, as usual. What's up, Grant?
I'm good. This is Austin. Austin Gill.
No. This
He's
is
excellent.
Austin.
Yeah. I'm Grant.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to introduce you as Austin Gill.
Thanks. Maybe you should stop saying this is Austin Gill and say that's Austin Gill. You're Austin Gill.
But I should just say
you.
Hey Austin Gill.
Hey Austin Gill. There it is. It's right there
hey
in the Twitter
Austin
handle.
Gill.
Yeah. What's up?
It's going to take me weeks to remember that, but
we'll figure this out someday.
One of these days.
Yeah. Real quick before we get started, we are doing the live stream to get this recording going as usual. So anyone that is joining us today will see this. But for those of you that are not on the live stream and are listening to the show, we have a little banner up that is prompting folks to donate to help families displaced by the war in Ukraine. If you want to go to help.rescue.org/Ukraine-ACQ, that's a good organization that I found to donate to for humanitarian aid, shelter, food, psychological help. There's a lot of people that are having to flee their homes, and I felt like we can do more to help them. So I just wanted to get that out from the start.
Nice.
Yeah. How are you doing, Grant?
If I had even a single shred of a complaint, what an asshole I would be. I mean,
yeah, all things considered, pretty good, right?
Yeah, like things are quite excellent in my life.
Yeah.
I did manage to break a bone this last weekend, but like I did this while I was racing my bike, like just being a complete
badass. You can say it.
Jabroni.
Jabroni.
Can I say that I was being a complete jabroni out there, just like trying to be super cool mountain bike guy, and just went face first into the ground, face first, followed by my left shoulder, which it broke. So
yeah, well, it's fortunate that your face caught the brunt of the impact, because that's not going to take any more damage.
Yeah,
it could have been a lot worse on your shoulder.
No,
that was mean. I got some sauciness in there. Sorry.
You got a mean streak, and it's so amusing to me when you get mean, because I'm just not accustomed to it. Like, you're such a nice guy most of the time that it's always shocking.
You know what it is? It's like, it's not genuinely mean. It's just there was a really good opportunity to say something there.
You just saw the opening and went for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, that sucks. I saw the video. The video was pretty entertaining up until the point where you fall. Entertaining because, like, I know that sounds terrible because we both know the result of the video, but I was watching it and I was entertained by watching it, because you were like hitting it. You're like talking to yourself and coaching yourself through this trail, like, yeah, let's do this. All right. And then you like hit, like, you kind of came off trail and you're like, oh man, I hope I didn't lose my derailleur. Whoa. Just like, hey, crap. And it was just like, it was such a roller coaster of emotions to watch, because you're like, oh, he's like motivating himself. Cool. Inspiration. And then, the derailleur came off. Mystery and fear and like concern and a bit of humor too. And then you crash and it's like, oh my gosh, did I just watch my friend die. So
Yeah.
it was entertaining.
Well, I appreciate that my like insignificant personal tragedy has entertained it brings it true value to be honest. So
well, yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry that you broke a bone. That's pretty rough.
yeah. Well, I'll heal and I'll go race and break more. It'll be great.
Yeah, man. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
That's just really not true.
It really isn't.
I mean, anybody who's got old injuries can tell you.
It's not true, man. But I'll tell you what, my Pop Warner football coach just drilled it into my brain. So
you can't unknow that.
Yeah. Yeah, my week was good. Thanks for asking.
For sure. Well, see, here's like there's a little bit of like a weird interaction here because prior to this, you were doing another stream, right? Yeah. I was watching that stream.
Oh, really?
And so it's like this weird like interact. Yeah, I was watching the stream, man.
You didn't even say anything.
I don't know how to. And the Twitter stream thing, there's like no chat or interaction.
Yeah. The Twitter one's weird.
The Twitter one's not super useful.
I mean, you watched it.
That's true. But you were doing some cool stuff on there. You were like, this weather app used to be terrible and now it's great. And you're welcome world. Good stuff.
Well, it's not deployed yet. I still need to deploy it. But it's cool.
It's like edge workers and doing stuff that's fast rather than intentionally bogging people's lives down to try and advertise to them.
Yeah.
Stuff that I appreciate.
It was fun. It was accessible too. There was an episode that we did where we went through with like a screen reader and the keyboard and just like navigated the entire application. Just
see that cool. and like walking through that, I should go and watch that. But that type of stuff, I don't see broad audiences like flocking to that. They're like, how do I build an app like a full stack app in Next.js? Not like I have this application. How do I check for accessibility? Like outside of using the Axe Lighthouse tool, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, and that's not. It's a good start. It's a good utility to assist with accessibility, but the 100% on there does not mean 100% accessible.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I want all 100s across there anyway, just for bragging rights. But of course. It's a good start.
Yeah. So tell me about your work week though. You were telling me a little bit before the show about some Next.js stuff, and it sounded interesting. So we decided to hold off.
So I want the audience to be aware that like we have conversations prior to recording our show, and it's really funny because if I start talking about something that sounds like it might be good on the show, I get like this immediate shut up vibe.
Hold on. No, shut up.
Wait, would this be good for the show? Then stop talking.
Yeah,
it's so great.
That's good.
Yeah. So what was I talking about? So like my work week has been astoundingly crazy. Like we are mid-launch on one project and we are starting QA on another project, and it's all this re-platforming stack that I've been building for the last like 7-8 months, which is like a Jamstack headless, very typical, like it's the modern cool guy stack. Like I go to conferences and talk about performance kind of dude stuff. So it's that kind of a thing, but I've had to do some very bad stuff to work around some behaviors that I'm aware of in some of the meta frameworks, right? And so we're specifically using Next.js, which is like, I'm sure it's great for people who are using it for like Next's intended purpose. But I'm just using it as like a static site generator. I'm using Next export, and I have one file that builds pages based on stuff that comes back from Contentful. And right now we're having to do this like what is it, like get static paths. Like we're jumping through a bunch of hoops in get static paths to build paths from like a field in Contentful, and then you can't pass any of this data into get static props, which is the next function that runs in the static generation series that Next runs. And so like I have to then go and like refetch a bunch of stuff. And if the data that I get from that refetch isn't what I expect it to be, like I have to then refetch everything from Contentful and do a lookup, because Contentful's search based on slugs is a little bit weird if you're using fallback data. Anyway, this is like way too deep.
You're like you just took it and ran with it as far as like you went way off the rails on what I'm under. Okay, so let me bring it back and see if I understand what's going on.
Okay.
Next.js can be used to generate a static site.
Yes.
And if you have like statically defined pages in your project, easy enough. Next says, cool, let me get that like markdown file and build a HTML file from it.
Right. It's designed around what they call, so like both Gatsby and Next.js follow the same pattern of you have a folder, and in that folder you create files, and these files are supposed to be like a representation. It's like it's PHP-ish in its
file-based routing.
Yes, versus other stuff. So go on, sorry.
But on top of that, so maybe you do have some static files in there and it's pulling that content from the project folder, like on disk. But part of that is you also want to grab some data that's coming from a CMS, Contentful. And that data can be updated at any given time because people on your team, editors, whatever, are going in, logging in, hitting save, and whatever. At the point that you run your build process, whatever is in Contentful, Next is going to make a request to the API, grab the content for those pages, bring it back, and try and dynamically build pages from that data. But the pages that it needs to, like the records of which pages to build, live in Contentful.
Mm-hmm.
And those are stored by, like, they have some sort of slug so that then Next.js knows what the path is to build this page at.
Exactly. And Contentful is not really designed around the idea that it should control routing, right? Like,
right.
It's like a content entry layer around a document database is like, this is what their product actually is.
I don't know if that's true though. Like it seems weird because it does market itself as a CMS. So in theory, it would say, hey, I've got all of the blog posts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying it doesn't? It's not built for that?
I'm going to stand by my previous statement of it is a content entry layer around a document database. They do a good job. So like if you think about exactly what content management is, that is a content management system. It is a CMS. However, like there are some issues there that like we don't need to get into that. This is not about Contentful and the issues there. Like I have weird standards around CMSs, having worked to build one and seen how the sausage is made. Anyway, the sin that I committed today.
This is it. This is the juicy. We're like, juicy.
We're getting around to it. So we have some slugs that come from Contentful, and this is a magical string that in our page building process I have decided we have to ignore this particular slug and do something different with it. And so there's like some hard coding, and then there's some static path creation that also has to be hard coded just in order to build pages. And then because I can't pass data from get static paths into get static props, I have to infer some information to make requests to Contentful to get the right page data. So like I'm stripping data out that I need later in the process in order to make my paths line up correctly. But in order to get the page data correct for each of these paths
then
that
you
I've
have
now
to go get the data again.
Yep. So there is some like merging that was infuriating.
Couldn't you like, are you going to Contentful to get that data, or are you kind of like storing it in a local cache? Like,
So this is a great question. This is an absolutely great question. What local cache?
you could store it on the file system.
So yeah, not a terrible idea. I would like to run some sort of like local persistent memory
Yeah.
during the node process for Next.js, but I don't know if they allow that. So I have tried writing to the file system from within one of Next's methods, and it didn't seem to like that.
It's
I
definitely
didn't
possible.
I didn't deep dive into why it didn't work for me that time because I found another workaround at the time.
Yeah.
So that may be
Eh,
possible,
I mean,
but
honestly, like your solution, if it works, the concern with making that extra network request, like fetching the same data twice,
mhm,
is not really a big one, I don't think, because that's only going to happen
during build.
at build time,
Yep.
every time you build. So if you're building once a day, who cares, right?
Yeah.
And once a day is like still kind of a lot for static sites. Well,
Yeah, it's
depends.
so Netlify just released some really cool stuff where I can schedule
Yeah.
I can schedule cloud functions that I can kick off builds with that I can like do a lot of really neat stuff with. So
Yeah.
we'll have some different controls around that I plan to work on. But the, today's confession
Confession time.
has concluded.
Cool. Well, I am having a tough week, which spurred my interest for our discussion today. It's actually going to be a surprise to Grant. So Grant does not know what we're talking about because I'm hitting him with some questions. So
I brought my whiteboard.
yeah. Background is I work at a company. We have a bunch of projects that we want to get done, and we don't have the team pipe, like we don't have enough workforce on the team to do everything that we want. So what's the solution? Outsource some of the work, right? Which
Mhm.
led us to work with an agency, and I actually don't know how much I should be saying, but whatever. People know I work at a company.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, it should be fine. So we outsourced some work, and that work, and you know, I've done this at many different companies, so it's a story that happens not specific to this week, but I'm being reminded today. Anyway, you outsource some work to an agency, and that agency's job is not to write amazing code. Like that agency's job is to just make it work.
Mhm.
And if they can deliver a product that works, it's kind of done, because then they're actually incentivized to, well, agent, like let's say that they're getting paid for the project and not for the hours. They're actually incentivized to just do a good enough job, send you the deliverables, collect
Yeah.
the paycheck, and cool, money in their pocket, right?
Yeah.
And the result of that is that I just time and time again just had these projects handed over that are just so poorly built. So I'm going to have a little bit of a time right now to just get some stuff off my chest and vent what's going on. I'm not going to name any names because I don't believe that that's useful, but
Right. And so like to be clear, I empathize with that deeply. So on the projects I'm working on, we have an agency that is contracted and they work in my repo and build alongside with me what I build.
okay.
Um,
And
so
they do
like
a good job.
they
Yeah,
can be held
I'm not saying
and
every agency, right? Like
right, right.
there's
But
some really good
prior to this
qualities.
job, I worked at an agency and I know their motivations and you're not wrong.
Yeah.
Um, it's a difficult position to be in. And also like you've worked at an agency.
I've worked in an agency. I've been in the position too. You know what the other motivator sometimes is like agencies, like their kind of job is to um, build a lot of similar projects over and over and over, right? Like a lot of brochure websites, things
Yeah.
like that. And as a developer that worked at an agency, I know the feeling of like, cool, like I've built this same thing a million times. I'm kind of interested in trying this new technology that I've never got to play with, and just like use it enough to get the project out and then move on to the new project. And maybe this was the first project that I've done with this new technology. So I didn't actually know it that well, but I kind of figured out how to get it to work. And then that was enough to hand it over to the client.
Right.
So anyway, not every agency is guilty of this. There's some really good people, but it brought up a couple topics. So I'll get to the topics momentarily. Still got some ranting to do about the specifics about what's going on, what I'm dealing with.
Okay.
So it's a Gatsby project. It uses Tailwind JS or Tailwind CSS. And so I don't know. That's all you really need to know, right? Gatsby,
This
React,
is like
Tailwind.
the opposite of your comfort zone. Well, no, like you've worked with Tailwind. You like Tailwind, but like this is React.
Yeah, I
And
wouldn't
this is
say I like
this is
Tailwind.
meta framework around React.
Yeah. I can sling some React, man. So this is actually within my comfort zone. Like if it like outside of my comfort zone would be like, yeah, we built a thing with Go, some like Go project, you know.
Okay.
So all right. So first thing I do when I get this project on my plate is I spin up a dev server. At least it works, right? I can get in and start deving on it. Or I spin up the production build, deploy it to, it's a static site generator, so it deploys it to like some folder. I run a local server on that folder. So this is to emulate the actual production results, what the product is that we paid for.
Mm-hmm.
And naturally, I throw it through a Lighthouse test, and it comes back with like 66 across the board on performance, accessibility, best practices, SEO, like everything was just like, dude, these are things that you as a developer literally have a checkbox. As much as I say Lighthouse is not the end all be all, but you literally have a checkbox of things that I don't know. First question: is it fair to expect good Lighthouse scores on a product that someone hands to you?
I have two feelings on that. One is, was this spec'd in the initial agreement with this agency?
I don't know
what these standards were. So
I'm not at the table making negotiations. I'm just getting the product.
So this is something that I see time and time again, where like these standards aren't set up front and people are disappointed with what they get back. And it's I think it's in the agency's best interest to hand over something that is performant, especially if they're using something like Gatsby, which is supposed to be performant out of the box. That's another discussion entirely, but
yeah,
like, no, it's not really acceptable, except maybe in the case where it's a big, like, heavy web application. But is it that?
Yeah, I mean, really, I think that the answer is like, it depends on what are the metrics that didn't pass, right?
Right.
So I don't even know where to start. In the accessibility score, everything was really bad. All of the links in the project were buttons with programmatic navigation. And this is so frustrating. Gatsby.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Gatsby has two components built in to the project that are amazing. Link.
Yes.
And image. And
these do cool things. You're correct.
They do some really awesome things, and they build on top of primitive, like platform primitives of HTML, right? The anchor link or the image tag.
Right.
We have link and image in our project. They are not the Gatsby link and image.
Oh, interesting.
They rebuilt two of the Gatsby native components and made them worse. Like the image tag, so like all of the cool stuff that Gatsby image does for you, it finds your local, like the local version of the image, and it can figure out what the rendered size of that image will be. And if the local the original source image is like larger, it will shrink it down to that size, and it will generate the source set attributes, and it will generate like it'll lazy load it and all of this stuff. We don't get none of that. Cool. That's a performance hit.
Right.
The link component will do some really cool stuff with like lazy loading links as you like hover over it, or as it enters the page or something like that.
Prefetching. Yeah.
But that wasn't good enough for this team. So instead, they just made everything a button.
Which negates the ability. Well, okay, depending on what the button does, they're not using React Router, which is re-rendering the whole page potentially. There's some weird issues with this.
It is doing something like that.
This is terrible, I don't even know. And a bad idea. They really messed up there.
Yeah. So let's keep this a little bit constructive. Of
okay, cool.
Why, like, I don't want to just spend the whole show bashing on this agency, right? But like there are some lessons to be learned here. Okay. One is, if something is built in and already badass, just use the built-in thing. Because one, as someone that knows this is a Gatsby project and I see link and image everywhere throughout the project, I'm like, cool, it's using the Gatsby link and image.
Right.
So there's assumptions that are made there.
Right.
On my part as a developer working on the project. And if you recreate it, you've essentially obscured that, and like not only just made it worse, but like now you've obscured what's going on.
Yeah. Can I throw like, so I want to throw something in there about the Gatsby image component real quick. So there are reasons to not use Gatsby image. Now these may have been resolved in the past couple of years, and I think like the original component was written by Amberly Romo, if I'm not mistaken. I could be. She's, as far as I know, still at Gatsby, but like this is it was absolutely cutting edge stuff, and still really is, and it automates a lot of really good behaviors that we want. It was notorious early on for being incredibly difficult to style. There were hooks into different wrappers that were around it to get around this, but I remember struggling with that.
That's fine, but then just use a regular image tag, not a pseudo image component that looks like the Gatsby image component but isn't.
True. Yes, that's very tricky of them.
The other learning opportunity here is that, okay, the links that are throughout this project and use JavaScript to navigate instead of anchor links. Big problem there. Bad for SEO, because now Google, if Google comes to the homepage and there's all these buttons that link places, it's not going to know how to crawl the rest of the site. Inherent, which it gets inherently from like looking at actual HTML links. That's one. Number two, not as performant really, because you're adding more JavaScript to do something that HTML has built in. Number three, bad for accessibility, because users with assistive technology land on a button. Browser is going to tell them it's a button, but they don't know what the button actually does.
Yes.
Whereas with a link, it tells them where it's going to go, whatever. Four, bad for user experience, because as a user that like really likes being able to open a link in a new tab, can't do that when it's a button, right? So many things. Please, developers listening, please stop using JavaScript to navigate pages. It's just so bad. Okay, moving on. That was like kind of big strike in my opinion. Really big strike. You know what Tailwind is. Tailwind CSS. It's a tool that provides a lot of utility classes. You can use whatever. Look it up if you don't know. Part of how Tailwind CSS works is you define a configuration file or use the default configuration file. And when you build your application, it will generate a ton of CSS classes. All of the possible options that you could ever possibly use from their default class list of classes, right? And we're talking thousands, I don't know, tens of thousands of classes, most of which you're not going to use. And so part of the Tailwind project and what they've built in is a step that includes like purging things, right? So you
Yeah.
tell it where your source code is, where your templates are. It reads the contents of those files, looks for any time that a class is used, keeps those classes intact, or like keeps a record of those classes, and then all of the other classes that it didn't find in your code, it rips out. So instead of having tens or hundreds of thousands of unused classes, you end up with just the classes that you've used.
Right.
Pretty awesome. Can actually lead to very, very small CSS bundles, unless you leave that step out, which is what happened in this project.
Okay.
Which means when I looked at the project, it was shipping 2 megabytes of CSS.
What?
Megabytes with an M.
So hearing this, wait, how big were the JavaScript bundles if that's how big the CSS bundles
man,
were?
I haven't even looked, to be honest. So, man,
I mean,
that was
Gatsby
another
does
thing.
a good job of like route-based code splitting, but
dude, Gatsby does
that
a good.
sounds
Like,
so irresponsible.
You gotta work hard to make it this bad. Sorry.
Yeah, so I hear you got some are there any questions that you have? You mentioned like constructive.
Yeah. Okay. So that constructive, learn about purge CSS. It's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't ship unused styles.
Yeah, like tree
and
shaking for CSS is something that,
Yeah.
like, this is really cool and we should use it. And it's automated.
Yeah. Okay, so that's kind of, let's see. There's probably more stuff in there, and I just keep on turning over stones that have crap underneath, you know.
It sounds to me like, so they decided not to use Gatsby image. They decided they skipped a build step for something. So there's potential here, right? That
Okay,
they
there's some
designed
other
this
things.
around slimming down build times.
That's a constructive way to look at it, I suppose. That's the other thing with Gatsby, man. It's a slow. I mean, coming from Vite, it's slow.
Yeah.
But okay, the other things are like just really obvious things like best practices stuff. So there was a ton of console warnings or errors when you just start the project, and it's like a lot of that is because they're not using React best practices. Like when you have a list, you have to have a key of when you map over things, right? You have to have the key attribute or property.
Okay, this is the single biggest Picard facepalm reaction you can get out of me, is if somebody is shipping a React project that has these warnings
and you don't fix it. Yeah.
They don't know how to work in React. Like this is not like this is a binary issue.
Maybe.
No.
The other things you want to know, hold on. Okay. It gets even better. In the Lighthouse score, it doesn't even have a title on the title tag.
Wait, the
or
page
a language
doesn't
tag
have a title?
Yeah, like
it comes with that from Gatsby out of the box when you start a project.
I don't know, man.
Your title is your project name.
I don't know. It's not there. I took it out. It's gone. Okay, so enough of the complaining, right? Like okay. I want to take this opportunity a little bit, like transitioning into the next part of the show or the next sort of segment, which is like we've done some complaining, we've done some constructive criticisms, whatever. This is probably my first big foray into like a full-on React project. And I got some questions for you as a result of working here, because some of this is like, do I not know what I'm doing? Is this just a Gatsby? Like, do I not know something about React? Do I not know something about Gatsby? Or is it just like these guys are doing something weird, right?
Okay.
So first question I have for you. Oh, actually, first question is the result of another issue is like there were like tons, like dozens of classes rendered to the page that were just undefined. Tons in my HTML, just a lot of like the string undefined in my HTML. Fun stuff. So leads me to my first question for you, which is with JSX, you don't use class, you use class name, right?
Yes.
And if I want to create a component, and we're going to try some mouth blogging here, So hopefully this will come across. If I want to create a custom component called like Grant is cool, right? That's my component name. And I want to put Grant is cool onto my other component called the function call page, right?
Okay.
And let's say in most of the instances of Grant is cool, we've got, I don't know, border top 0 because you don't have any border up there. Right. So
it's joke, people. That's fantastic.
It's all right. That was the best I could do. So you've got like border top of 0, right? So I'm going to put that like some class name on the Grant is cool component so that every time you use it, it always has that class.
Right.
But then when we put you on the function call component, I want to like inject some padding there, let's say, right? Just on that instance. So how do you merge those class names? Like I want it to have the, we'll call it the inherent class name or the self class name, and then the parent provided class name.
Right.
What's the approach there?
So you're talking to somebody who, well, one has a vague familiarity with CSS, and I also exclusively work with emotion for CSS, and so we would provide an array of these class names, or in the case of emotion, like CSS objects. So you could do this a couple of different ways, but you pass a prop.
You're talking about
right?
CSS properties, right? Or CSS rules. I don't care about the rule. Like I don't care about. Sorry, ignore border top. We'll just say like you have a class of bald.
Okay.
and then in my parent component, I want to give you another class of like
beard.
Yeah.
Okay.
So only when you're on the function call do you get the beard class, right? So
Right.
on the component instance, I'm going to say class name equals bald, and then when I actually implement the component within the function call parent component, I'm going to say function call parent component JSX. What is that? Less than bracket or like angle bracket? Angle bracket. Grant is cool component. Class name equals beard. Right. And then how do I merge the single instance to the component permanent classes?
Props? I mean, like this has become a bit obtuse, but props?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you pass a prop.
Yeah.
In the component, you need to know whether or not you're getting a prop.
And so that prop would be class name.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And so you can take a prop called class name and either spread that into your class name, depending on the priority that you want. You can put it like before or after your hard-coded internal prop.
Yeah.
Right.
Gotcha. So the sort of canonical or like industry accepted approach is although you're defining what should be like the HTML class, what looks like the HTML class on the implementation instance of the component, that's actually not the class, it's the prop called class name. And then in your component definition, you accept a prop called class name, and you have a default fallback, right? Because if you don't, then you could end up with undefined.
Right.
Okay. That's how we're doing it. They did not have default values for it, obviously.
Right.
But yeah, making sure that that's the right approach.
Okay.
Question number 2 comes back to props. You are a TypeScript guy. I'm a JS doc guy, which essentially is TypeScript.
We get along.
Yeah. Same thing under the hood, different flavors.
Right.
But both of these offer a way to define type definitions for the props that the component expects. Right?
Yes.
So how do you do that? Because I know that React offers a generic type called React FC.
Oh,
that you
yikes.
no, don't do that.
No. So
Okay.
in most modern React projects,
Mhm.
your component will be a function that just returns JSX, right?
Right.
And so your function signature, if it returns JSX, there's usually reasonable uh, type inference
Yep.
around, right? Like some of the like extended um, HTML attributes that can go on to any JSX element, right? So any function that returns JSX is treated and allowed this, right? So
Yeah.
there are issues with I believe the React FC type. It's not great. It's not something that I believe they plan to continue to support. Are they using that in this project and it's creating some sort of black
I've
hole?
been adding that. I've been adding it
Okay.
because essentially what I have is if you define a function that is actually a component, and you want to provide type definitions for the props, then you
Mhm.
have to somehow provide the types for the props
Right.
argument, right? And you can do
Oh,
that a
okay.
number of ways. You can either take the entire, like the single argument and assign it some sort of type.
Mhm.
Like, let's say it has an object with a class name and a count, right?
Right.
Class name is a string, count is a number. And then let's say it also includes a complex type or a complex uh, prop type, which is going to be an object, which is like an author, right? A name, first name, last name, image,
Right.
right? So we've got a class name, which is a string, a count, which is a number, an author, which is an object that has first name, last name, image.
Okay.
How would you provide the type definition for the props argument for
You
that?
so it's the same as any other function signature, right? So the
Hmm.
arguments that come in are defined as either a single type if it takes a single argument. Typically, React will take a props object. So you want to define that record with the keys that you expect, values, all of that.
Okay, so you're doing that mouth coding is going to be like const my component equals open parentheses props colon and then the type, which is a record,
Yeah.
and then
Record,
in
string, whatever, right? We
right,
want to just let it take whatever.
right, and then there's also that nested record, right, for the author.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so you're doing it just like that. Okay. Um, yeah, you could do it that way. You can do it that way with JS docs. I think. What do I find annoying about that? I think I find it annoying because generally speaking, I don't. I will destructure my props. I won't leave it as a single argument, but I'll destructure so I have all of the props like
Yeah, you can totally do
const.
that with this. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you do it in that approach, you would have const my component equals parentheses opening curly bracket,
Mhm.
and then class name colon string comma count colon number
Mhm.
comma.
Well, so what you do is you destructure with commas without the type definition, right?
Right, and then you say
And then
that that
colon at the end
equals
of
a
the
number,
close curly,
or
and then
right, and then you
a-
provide the type definition there.
then the type definition, right?
Okay, that's fine. What I don't like about that is now I'm having to define my parameters in two places, right? Because one, I'm defining the destructured props property, and
Mhm.
then two, I'm defining the props property type. Make
Yes.
sense?
Right.
And I'm just trying to find out like what is the approach that you take? So you're not using prop types, right? You're just using
No,
TypeScript.
no.
Okay.
Yeah, just TypeScript.
You're not using prop types. You're not using default props.
Nope, you can just do an
You
equals and give it a default value. Mhm.
okay. And the default value. Okay. Yeah, because with the default value, then it can infer the type.
Yep.
Unless it's something like a union.
Well, then you have to cast a string, or you have to use uh, a string that is from that union. It shouldn't reject that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Boy, that stuff is complicated. Like my whole world with TypeScript is like I just want to infer everything. I want to write everything once and just infer it. I don't want to write things twice.
In some, oh God, that hurt. In some scenarios, that can work. But in my experience, the more heavy-handed you are with telling TypeScript what to expect, the better safety you create. And so, like I've seen
Yeah.
inferences get wild, where like
Yeah.
absolutely not, that's not what this is. But if I tell TypeScript this is what you need to expect, it has caught some things that would have been very bad.
Yeah.
So
Boy, that whole thing with like trying to get inference so that you only have to write it once. I will spend so much time so that I don't have to write something once. Like I will spend so much time trying to figure out how to do the correct type so that I don't so I can only write it once just so that I don't have to write it twice. One time in the whole project, you know?
well, I mean, so
Yeah.
in the case of something like a union type where you only want to accept very specific
Mhm.
strings that represent class names from Tailwind per se,
Yeah. Yeah, let's say.
right? Like, yeah, you should be using a single union that you were referring to absolutely everywhere, right?
Right, that's not exactly what I was talking about, but just
Okay.
like TypeScript
Or like
can
creating a partial of a
yeah.
union type that is right.
TypeScript
So
is just everyone's favorite way to just waste so much time.
my pushback against that is the multiple massive refactors that it's allowed me to do without breaking absolutely everything. Whereas in a JS project, I know that would not have been the case. Like
Yeah,
it creates an amount of safety that is really, really good if you're not allowing any's and setting your project up to be pretty strict.
yeah.
But
So
it
I'm
does
not saying
require all this.
TypeScript. I'm not saying TypeScript is a waste of time. I think it does save time in the long run, but I think in that time that it saves, there is still a lot of wasted times on things that don't actually
Oh,
provide
absolutely.
value for like
Oh, there's
for those
yeah.
like rewrites and stuff. Like you just
Yeah.
spend a bunch of time and it's like, shoot, I just spent so much time creating this complex type that is so flexible when really I could have just done like a much more strict type thing
Yep.
definition. Anyway, let's move on. So
Okay.
that transitions into kind of the next question is if I have a component that um, let's say it's like a section with a big header text, right?
Mhm.
Oh, and this was another thing that they just did that was so annoying. Okay, constructive criticism for people creating components: don't name any of your props, any of the HTML attributes that exist.
Oh.
Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah. So they just have so many things that they called all of these sections in the entire page. They all have a title, which is
Oh god.
the text. It's the
Yeah.
text that's supposed to be in the component. But if I want, that means that if I want to give this element an actual HTML title tag, I can't because they've hijacked that meaning to mean the text of the component, not the HTML title attribute. So don't do that, kids. Um, lesson learned.
Wow.
Lots of refactor going on there. Um, so, but getting back to my point or my question
Mhm.
is, if I want to create a type definition for a prop that can either be a string or like another React component or like a fragment or like some JSX,
Mhm.
I have found that the approach that I take is I give it a union type of string, pipe, string, or and then I have a few options: JSX element, React node, React element. What's the deal there? Any idea? And you know what I'm talking about?
Wait. Are we talking about children?
No.
What?
No,
I
no,
think
no.
I feel like I missed something. I'm sorry.
Okay, hold on one second, because
Mhm.
just 1 second.
Mhm.
Okay, so think of it like children, right? Like I can take my custom component and I can put the opening closing tag, and then I can put content in the middle of that. That's children, right?
Mhm.
Now consider that maybe it accepts children for like the bulk of the section, but then I also have like this custom header that I don't want you to actually.
That also accepts another potentially React component or a string or whatever,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
this is almost like a render props pattern, and this is
yes.
gross. I don't like it.
Okay.
That's
Well,
typed.
just
I mean,
it's useful.
to your question. So yeah, absolutely, it's useful. It mimics slots, which we do not have in React.
Yep.
But I also don't like it, and I think it's kind of gross.
That's not
So
the
like,
question.
okay.
The question is, what type do I provide this prop that can either be a string or like some JSX? Like, is it a
uh,
JSX element? Is it a React node? Is it a React element?
so I tend to use, so it could be a string or React element or React element array. Or sorry,
Okay.
React node.
Okay.
Right.
So yes. So which one
I
do you
side on
prefer? Like,
React node.
okay, why React node instead of JSX element? This is something that I have not discovered
So like
where the
JSX
pitfall
element
is.
is not, I've tried to use that type and have run into issues trying to pass normal like HTML props to it. So like it doesn't behave correctly. So if you look at the
Interesting.
way when you create a like styled component, I believe I'm trying to like open up a project right now to look,
Mhm.
but I believe styled components um, and emotion both have rallied around React Node or React Node Array
Okay.
instead of JSX element
Yeah,
for
because I
reasons where
saw.
the types don't quite align to what you expect them to align to.
Well, the funny thing is though, I saw Kevin Ball. He was on JS Party, and he was saying how he typed everything to be a React node, and React
Mhm.
node is just a fancy word for any.
What?
Yeah, it doesn't actually provide the type safety that you would expect. So that's worth
I
looking
need to look
into.
into that then,
Yeah,
because
I can share a link there in the show notes
yeah.
about that. So then, okay, which leads me to another question: is what type do you use for an SVG? So let's say I
Oh.
import I import an SVG file,
Mm.
and then I want to provide that as like the icon for my component prop. Like my component accepts a prop called icon. What is that type supposed to be if I know it's supposed to be an SVG?
I think that depends on what you're using to pre-process. Like, what are you using to tell JSX how to handle this import?
Hmm.
Like this comes down to like some other project scaffolding
It's like a Webpack
question.
thing.
Yeah.
Ugh, annoying. It's probably so. I feel like that would probably just be like an HTML string, right? Or no, it wouldn't, because then I would have to do like dangerously set HTML or whatever.
Yeah.
That's probably going to take an SVG and convert it to a JSX SVG.
Yeah.
Ah, so frustrating. Um, all right. I think the last question I have, and we have just a few minutes left, is there a way to, how we were talking about those inferred prop types for one component,
Hmm.
right? Like I have a component, it's a function, I define, it has a couple props, whatever.
Yeah.
Is there a way to grab the prop type definitions from that component? And let's say I want to create now a wrapper component that implements that, and I want to be able to provide the exact same props. Can I just like infer the prop type definition from child component and like pass that to parent component easily, or do I have to essentially like pull that type definition into its own type definition, export it from that file, import it in the parent?
So I tend to define component props separately and export them alongside the component in the same file so that I can do just that.
Yep. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, that's basically where I landed as well. And I was hoping that there was a magic way to just like, hey, TypeScript, you see this component here. I want you to ignore what that component type is, but you see those fancy props that that component type has? Yeah, just like take those and extend them over on this component.
There's no like return type utility or anything like that that would give you kind of what you want. Yeah, it's a lot of it just comes down to just manually doing it and having a reasonable pattern around what you export.
See, once again, that's the lazy guy in me that's like, I just want to write it once and just like infer everything. But anyway,
well, you can. You just have to export and import it everywhere.
Yeah, well, that's but that's the thing is like I have to export or I have to import the component everywhere I want to use it, and I also have to import the type for the props. You know, and it's just like bleh.
I mean, that's what we like. Yeah, that's what you got to do.
I know. All right, well, let's wrap it up because that's all the questions I have anyway.
This project used TypeScript?
No, this is the beautiful thing about JS Docs is I can just take a JavaScript project and just get started with it and get the type definition safety as I work through each file. It's great.
I'll tell you a secret. You can also do that with regular TypeScript.
Well, you have to convert the file to TypeScript though.
Allow JS true and
yeah, you're right.
them as you convert them. Yeah. Like
but then you still have to convert the whole file.
So like one of the early decisions that they made in TypeScript was to try to be as accommodating. This is why any exists, right? They were trying to be accommodating to people.
Not listening.
They're trying to be accommodating to people who are making like a slow transition. So, you know, it is what it is. But yeah, like you're doing your JS doc thing and power to you.
And it's good. So far, it's been great. I love it. Cool.
I wish more of your questions were like actually React specific questions. They all seem to really just kind of be TypeScript questions.
Well, I guess so. It's a
and like how not to write code for the web platform questions.
Yeah, but to be fair, it's a project that builds out like a brochure site, so you don't have a huge level of complexity. Like there's not user management or logs in sessions or things like that, you know. So it's
so to be clear, this was like a softball project that managed to get real bungled.
I guess so. Yeah.
Yikes, bud. Sorry. I'm real sorry this is happening to you.
That's all right. Cool. Well, let's call it. At the end of the show, we like to take an opportunity to give some shout outs to anything that we think is cool that we came across this week. Could be entertainment, some tech related stuff, could be food or animals. So hit me. What you got, Grant?
CryoCuff. So
CryoCuff.
If you ever get injured, say you break your shoulder riding a mountain bike and you need to ice your shoulder, there is a really, really cool product that basically lets you take a bucket of water and cycle it through a cuff to keep it cold. So like my shoulder, since it's broken right now, generates like a ton of heat, and so it just melts ice. It doesn't care. Those ice packs just like heat up on my shoulder and they're done. But this CryoCuff, like, it stays cold. It's solid.
That's pretty sweet. I am going to give another shout out to the rescue.org donation page. So help.rescue.org/donate/Ukraine-ACQ. And I'm going to do another personal shout out to a video game. So you may not know me as a video gamer, and that's because I'm not a video gamer. But there, every once in a while, every like decade or so, there comes a game that just really gets into my addictive personality and just like hooks me. And this new game just came out called Elden Ring. It's sort of like Skyrim, which was my previous sort of addiction game. It's I've heard it compared to Breath of the Wild, but a little bit. It's like a cross between Breath of the Wild or Skyrim sort of thing. Anyway, it's a sort of fantasy RPG. What is it? Open world thing.
Do you hunt monsters?
There's some monsters, yeah, and it's cool, man. The character design is so cool. Like the bad guys, some of them are so gnarly. And it's from these creators called From Software, who did like the Dark Souls franchise, and those games are known to be like incredibly difficult. And this game, I think, it feels like a little bit more approachable, but they're still like, it's still pretty hard. Like you die a lot. The point of the game, not the point, but part of the mechanics of the game is you have to die a lot because you have to like, I don't know, this enemies are tough. Anyway, it's fun.
So when we don't have a show for the next like 6 weeks, it's because you're like sucked into that.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I actually don't have a copy of it. I've been playing at Stuart's house.
But right on.
I'm gonna get a copy. I need to get a new computer. I'm buying a new computer so that I can play this game. True story. Because
I'm
none of mine have graphics cards. Yeah. All right. Well, that's the show. Thank you everyone for hanging out. I know that there was someone on the live stream today. So if you want to hang out and chat after the show, we're going to be on we can be on for a little bit. If you have some questions, otherwise, yeah, we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Okay. That is the end of the show. Hello, single viewer on Twitch. Are you interested in chatting with us? Have any questions, or are you just lurking?
Lurker.
Lurking.
Long time lurker. First time lurking.
Yeah. Cool. I'm gonna give it like 10 more seconds for you to say something. Otherwise, we can just catch you next time.
Speak now or forever hold your lurks.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What a lurk. All right, Grant. Let me see. Let's